Hi kids, it's Professor Agar here, back again with a stirring talk on, I want to talk about lens flare. You've probably seen some great photographs with backlighting, sun coming through trees and or fog, light mist. Very dramatic, it's great stuff, especially in color. Black and white, same thing, you get some very dramatic pictures, but sometimes you get lens flare and you really don't want it at all. And this happened to me just recently. In fact, it was last month when we had a recent snowfall with lots of icicles, and it was, well, we still have it up in northern Minnesota, but right now it is, what month is this? It's June. It's June. So I got my June shirt on. As soon as the summer comes and days get longer, the sun gets beating down hot, I like to protect myself. I mentioned this in a previous lecture. I always put on a hat to shade my eyes. And further shade my eyes, I also put on dark glasses. Your lens needs the same comfort. Your lens has to be comfortable when it photographs. There's a number of reasons why. Certainly, lens flare can be one problem, but even if it's a day where there's not a problem with flare, the sun going into the lens, you also have a problem with contrast. So you get improved contrast when you use a lens shade. So I brought in two of my cameras and a bunch of my lenses. I have here my trusty Nikon with just a normal lens, and here's my lens shade specifically for that. And then this camera here, I've got my, this is a 24 millimeter, and I have a lens shade for that also. I have here a portrait lens. It's a 105 lens, and I also have an appropriate lens shade for that. You'll notice as you compare the different lens shades from normal to long to wide angle, they're a little different lengths. The telephoto is the kind of the longest. The wide angle, 35 millimeter, is the most broad, and then the normal is just kind of normal. So that's why if you have a telephoto lens on your camera, sometimes it's hard to use a lens shade that's appropriate, because you might, if you zoom out and you've got a lens shade that's appropriate for a wide angle lens, then you'd see the lens shade in the corner of your image, which is kind of a pain. And then also I have what lens is this? This one here is my, it's a 35 millimeter. And I have a lens shade for that. So it goes from telephoto, 50 millimeter, 35 millimeter to wide angle. Now I thought I would just demonstrate slightly how that lens shade works so you can sort of visualize it. And these two pictures I'm going to show you, which I took last month, at the end of a big snowfall and lots of ice coming off the roofs. I saw this scene, and I was just going along the street, and I said, oh, I got to get a picture of that, just because I was kind of bored and I want to get some pictures. So I shot a roll of film, and when I developed the film, I saw, and actually while I was shooting the pictures, I could see the light was coming into my lens. For that particular camera and that particular lens, I didn't have a lens shade that was appropriate. So what I ended up doing was using my hand just to sort of cover the side that the light was coming in, and I'll demonstrate this in just a moment. So I just wanted to show you these two examples. Now this first picture was of this ice, and the light was coming in at a very strong angle, and that's what made the ice really stand out. So I took a couple pictures, but I noticed that I was getting some obvious flare in my lens. So luckily I was able to use my hand to cover the lens, and I had to move it back and forth because I never really knew when my hand was actually could be seen with the lens. So I took a couple, and luckily I got one that worked out well. But I also made a print showing the flare coming in. You know, actually, as I made the print, you know, at first I said, oh, that's terrible, that flare. But then later, as I made the print, I said, well, actually, I kind of like it. This is just an example of where you want to use a lens shade, or possibly your hand, or if you have a gray card, you can also hold up a gray card off to the side, and you'll be able to see when it's just getting to the edge of the lens, and then you know that it's blocking the light. So let me demonstrate that out with my camera and a strong light in the studio. Kids, here I set up my camera as if I'm outdoors on a, late in the afternoon, early in the morning, and there's a strong light coming in and hitting the side of the lens, which causes a flare. And if you don't have a lens shade, also gives you a problem with contrast. So to imitate this, what I've done is I've put a piece of cardboard here and punched a little hole in it, and I've got one of our donation lights, because North Hennepin never has enough money to buy anything, and when we do get good stuff, it all gets stolen anyway, so what the heck. So and I'll just turn on the light, and if you look, you can see that in the lens, there's a strong light hitting it, which, of course, will give you both flare and gives you kind of a grain effect of your image, so you don't have good contrast. Now, if you didn't have a lens shade, what you could do, and what I've done in the past too, either using my hand or a gray card, just slightly cover it like this. So you have to look at the camera. This is, if you're holding the camera and not on a tripod, you can actually see as you're putting your hand in front of the lens, you can see where suddenly, the contrast is great, the flare is gone, and then you can press the shutter. But in this case, you can actually see it physically as you just kind of hold your hand over it like that. Well, that's kind of a pain in the butt using your hand or a gray card, and some people don't walk around with gray cards. Although I go to sleep with them at night, my wife, who says, Mr. Agar, she always calls me Mr. Agar, why do you insist upon going to sleep with a gray card in the middle of the night? And I say to her, Mrs. Agar, I always call her Mrs. Agar, I say, well, you never know when you might want to get a good zone 5 meter reading in your dreams. This happens to me sometimes. Anyway, so now I'll put on an actual lens shade that's built for this camera. Lens. Easier said than done. Come on, get in there. Usually there we go. All right, now with the lens shade, notice you've got light on this side, shadow on this side, and the shadow that protects the lens just comes right up to the edge of the glass. So then you have good contrast, and you'll also have no lens flare. So kids, with that little demonstration, I hope you can see that using a lens shade, it makes good sense for quality photography, giving you better contrast and keeping the flare off your scenes that, if you don't want, could be quite hindersome in making a good print. So that's all for now, just a short video, just giving you some advice on good photography taking in a guerrilla photography fashion. Thanks, kids. See you later.